Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today. I know it is later on Friday before a fun weekend, so we really appreciate you all being here, as well as our guest for our second GPSA Town Hall, Provost Chilton, who is very nice and dedicated her time to yet another town hall on her schedule to answer some questions specific to graduate and professional students and questions that you all submitted about what's coming up and current changes and everything that's on most graduate and professional students' minds. And so just a quick reminder that we will answer or try to answer all the questions that were submitted prior to this town hall. But if you are watching live and you do have a question come up, please feel free to put it in the chat in YouTube. We have both Craig Parks from the Office of the Provost, as well as some members of GPSA monitoring the chat, and we'll be able to answer any questions that may come up. And so with that, I think I will turn it over again. Provost Chilton, thank you so much for being here. And if you want to do just a quick introduction, that'd be great.
Yes. Well, thank you for having me. I will just say that I joined WSU as provost on July 15th. I moved to Pullman at the end of June with my son, who's a college sophomore, and my husband, who, like me, is an archaeologist and anthropologist. And we also brought our two very loud, rambunctious dogs who fortunately are being very quiet, which makes me scared. I may lose another pair of shoes in the deal. I've previously taught and was an academic leader at UMass Amherst, at Harvard University, and most recently at Binghamton University. I have been very heavily involved in graduate education throughout that time. I still do have one doctoral student who I'm helping move through to a defense this academic year. Fingers crossed. He's doing great. And I served as a graduate admissions director when I was at UMass Amherst, as well as a department chair. So I'm really looking forward to getting to know all of you. I wish it were in person, but I know we'll have great opportunities for that down the road.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, my dogs are also currently quiet, and that worries me as well. So if there are interruptions, no worries. That's just part of this virtual world. But yeah, so thank you for that. And again, welcome. And I think we can just dive into some questions. So like I said, we did have a handful submitted from students before this. And they deal with what, everyone's talking about right now, whether it's the pandemic, spring semester, just upcoming plans and changes. And so the first few questions are COVID related and deal with decisions around the current pandemic we're all living through. And I know that many students are really struggling to keep up with deadlines and procedures and, obtaining that final degree, because it's just a really difficult time and everything's kind of compounding. So it's been brought up that faculty have received some kind of formal university-wide accommodations in response to the pandemic. And students asked what formal accommodations, if any, might be in the works for graduate students as we move into another semester of a pandemic in a virtual environment.
Right. So unfortunately, Dean Gloss, she's the dean of the graduate school, she wasn't able to be here with us today. But from what I understand, we don't have formal accommodations per se, which is the way the question was worded. But the graduate school did provide automatic extensions to students whose time to degree clock ended in the summer or fall of 2020. So for example, students whose clock was supposed to expire in fall 2020 were provided a 1-year automatic to fall 2021. That's similar to the tenure clock extension. Students already on a first or second extension were given an automatic 1-semester extension. Right now, I think the graduate school just continued to be lenient in granting requests for extensions of the time to degree on a case-by-case basis moving forward.
Great, that's helpful. And I think for any students who are facing those difficulties or need some help, the grad school has put out there, that please reach out to them, and they are working on more of that case-by-case basis to help our students out.
Mhm.
So that's great to hear. The next question focuses a bit more on enforcement. And I know we saw quite a spike in cases in the beginning of the semester. And there's this, concern that this may happen again when students come back in the spring. And so other universities have kind of implemented more formal reprimands for people they discovered not following COVID policies set by the university. I know for one example, a university mandates a day-long Zoom class if they chose to get into a large group gathering, a party, not wearing masks, that kind of thing. Is there any talk of this happening in the spring if we have maybe more classes in person and students aren't really following those policies?
So a couple of things. First of all, and I don't mean this to sound like a cop-out at all, but as provost, I'm the chief academic officer, and my purview is really the academic mission of the university. So I am in the president's cabinet, and of course I collaborate with student affairs and other vice presidents, and I'm in the cabinet when we're making decisions about things like what you're talking about, enforcement. But it isn't being here for 3 months and not knowing what our previous policies were. I'm certainly not the content expert. What I will say is that I don't know of any universities that enforce or implement punishments for students who live off campus. Right now, our on-campus students, we have extremely low and very cases and very good compliance for students who are living on campus. Where we have seen the greatest increase in cases are students who live off campus, and we have a very difficult, it's really impossible to discipline off-campus behavior. For on-campus violators, we're using an intervention approach, which seems to be working very well. And, punishment models around the country are actually under some increasing legal scrutiny for lack of due process or uneven enforcement, suspension, expulsion without tuition reimbursement. There have been some cases that have gone to the courts. So, we feel that we've really focused as a university, we've really focused on the intervention, education, and we're working on a rigorous testing protocol for the spring with quarantining, et cetera. And certainly if there are egregious cases that require some kind of disciplinary behavior, those are being handled on a case-by-case basis if it's something that the university has a legal purview over.
Great. I think that's really helpful. And it is important to know that a lot of that was off campus, right? And falls beyond the university's control. And Poland police were, making a lot of changes to try to address that. So hopefully they'll continue to do so. But it's good to hear that for those who are on campus, the compliance has been really great. I know I haven't really been on campus, so I don't know who's there, but that is really appreciated. And then the last question around COVID is kind of about the timeline of information. I know there is unfortunately a possibility that this pandemic continues into the summer and, even into the fall maybe, which is kind of an upsetting thought. But with that possibility, when might students start to hear decisions about fall 2021, which seems so far away, but is there a chance we'll hear, sometime in the spring, or is there a date we can wait for to hear a final decision about the fall?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, we haven't come up with a date yet. What I would say is that all of our efforts and focus right now are on getting the spring semester off to a good start. So, soon the semester will end in a few weeks. People will go visit families and friends near and far. And then we're planning, as I said, a rigorous testing protocol for on-campus students as they come back. And we're hoping to be able to extend that. Right now we haven't finalized the plan, but obviously we're doing testing, pre-testing for everyone right now on the Pullman campus anyway. And it's difficult to know what will happen in the wintertime with COVID. There's a lot of people who are saying that we could see huge increases, maybe even higher spikes than we've seen previously. and others who think that it might not be that bad. And so I think by the time we get to February, we're going to start being able to see, like, one, has there been any progress in terms of the science of both treatment and possible immunization? We'll know better in February than we know now. Um, Two, we'll know after we've moved the students back on campus. Some of them will actually stay over the winter, but the ones who move back campus and we start, the semester again, we'll start to see whether we're seeing any increases, not only among our faculty, staff, and students, but also our communities, because we have a responsibility to our communities in Whitman County in particular. So I think by the early spring semester, we will start to be able to see what we might predict for the fall semester. But again, we don't have a solid date. There's so much that's unpredictable right now.
Yeah, I feel like that's the atmosphere has been and will continue to be. But that's appreciated. Thank you. And so moving on to our next set of questions. These deal with the recent decisions around the schedule for spring semester and around spring break, which I know there's been a lot of discussion already. Mm-hmm. And so many students did bring up that the process on how the school decided to change the start date, right? We're starting later in January, and as well as removing spring break seemed very fast, right? Just kind of came. So can you just tell us what sort of student feedback was collected to make that decision around starting late and taking away spring break?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the impetus came from seeing a lot of campuses around the country, dozens really, start to make the decision to eliminate the spring break and start late. And the reason for this is completely epidemiological. It's about controlling the virus. So when we start late, that will allow us to do a staggered move-in rather than having students moving back to campus in Pullman all at once, whether it's 2,000 or 2,500 or whatever number we end up accommodating. Having everyone come in at once, those have been shown, and I could cite some schools in New York when you have that massive move-in with parents and cars and stuff, that there have been huge spikes. So we want to be able to have a staggered move-in, arrival testing, and that will involve some potential quarantining. So that extra, starting a week later, gives us that little bit of a buffer zone to be able to move people in a staggered fashion. The elimination of spring break, I mean, to me, that was the almost most important part from a perspective of eliminating or mitigating against the spread of the disease. The idea is that if we do this arrival testing, and then we have a testing protocol for students on campus and for even a larger campus community, and then we send everyone away for a week or 10 days, and they come back, then we have to do all of that all over again, and we can't stagger them to move back in over spring break, right? So it just was completely with keeping in mind the health and safety of our students, our staff, our faculty, our TAs, and Whitman County. So I initially ran, the Faculty Senate has purview over the academic calendar. And even though the Faculty Senate is advisory to the provost and president, the president and I, decided that we were not going to do this without following university protocols and asking the Faculty Senate to consider it. So the first step was to see whether they would support a change in the spring academic calendar. And I will be honest, at first, it didn't look like they were going to. They had a lot of questions. They had a lot of concerns. Some of the similar ones that we later heard from students about, we all need a break. For starting late, there were concerns about matching up with other schools and such. And so I discussed this with the chancellors. Some of them discussed it with students, faculty on their campuses. Once the Faculty Senate voted to support the proposal, that was a Thursday. The next day, it was a Thursday at like 4:00. The next day, I contacted the Student Government Council and asked if I could come and present the proposal to them, which I did on that Monday. There were a lot of questions similar to what I'm explaining to you, sort of like what were the reasonings behind this? And well, one of the big concerns was if you eliminate spring break, what about just mental health breaks? Like we all need to be off of Zoom. No offense, you're lovely, but everyone needs a little break from Zoom, including me. And so what we decided to do is scatter. So first of all, the semester in the spring will be 1 week shorter, completely shorter. Um, Meaning that we actually found that we had an extra week beyond what we were required to have for accreditation purposes. And then second, we will scatter 1 day breaks throughout the semester. And we're going to ask faculty to not have assignments due the day after those breaks, to not schedule meetings on those days. If students really want to meet with their faculty member that day, I suppose that's fine, but we want to have nothing required on those days so people can literally turn off their laptops, or students can anyway. Faculty are still going to be responsible for working on those days, but we're asking them to not have students, to give students a break. And even for faculty, we're saying maybe don't Zoom that day. Maybe just grade papers, or plan your syllabus for next semester. So that was the general timeline, and it did happen quickly. And I'll tell you why it happened quickly. We, as you probably know, are still going to have a hybrid semester in the spring, but predominantly remote. That's what we did this semester. We did expand the number of classes that will happen face-to-face in the spring, but we're still talking about 60 classes. So that's certainly a minority of the classes on the Pullman campus. And we were in the process in my office of literally deciding course by course which course would be in person and which would be remote. And we didn't know how many requests we were going to get, and we didn't know how many in the end we were going to feel that we could support, given ventilation. We were working with facilities, etc. And then we were publishing the course catalog for students so that they could start planning their spring schedules. And we realized that if we were going to make a decision about the spring calendar, we really needed to make it at the time we released the course schedule, right? Because if you say it's meeting Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but we're going to be eliminating, in this case, in the end, we eliminated 2 full weeks of classes, that may actually have to change the course scheduling of the meeting times. So that was the sort of sense of urgency, is that we wanted to do it when we released the course schedule, not release the course schedule and then 3-4 weeks later, then say, oh, and by the way, the entire spring calendar has changed. So, it was unfortunate that it had to happen so quickly. I was glad I was able to, appear before the Student Government Council and hear some of their concerns and take that into consideration when we made the final decision.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. I think that's just how we're getting used to things, right? Everything moves very quickly. And this next question you kind of already answered, but just to kind of clarify, we had this one submitted multiple times, so I kind of want to address it specifically. But this idea that students are already going to be traveling for winter break and then coming back, potentially, transmitting the virus. So why cancel spring break when students are already going to be traveling back and forth from Pullman in December and coming back in January? And are there ideas in general around limiting student travel?
Well, I don't know of any intention to limit student travel between the end of this semester and the beginning of next semester, but we are implementing an arrival testing protocol with quarantine. And they're working at a really fast pace. We have 2 vice presidents who are chairing up a committee, and Craig Parks, who's on here, is on that committee as well. So we're going to have a testing protocol that I believe, and Craig can correct me if I'm wrong, will include opportunities for faculty and staff to get tested. But what's really interesting is that we have not seen any transmission in those face-to-face classes that we did approve, because students, faculty, and staff are wearing PPE. They're maintaining social distancing and cleaning protocols. That's not where we're seeing the spread of the virus. The spread of the virus is predominantly through social gatherings outside of the formal educational experience. So when we bring students back, we're going to be testing, and then there's going to be testing throughout the semester. The issue is once we've done that, right? You test everyone, you quarantine the people who look like they are positive, you contact trace, you test those people. Once we get to a point, let's be optimistic. We get a few weeks in and we feel like, okay, we have it under control, right? It's not spreading. Then you let everyone go away for 10 days and you can bring them back and you have to start all over again. And the cost of this will be borne by WSU. This will not be inexpensive at all. One of I know it's not related to your question, but a lot of people have said, oh, why not refund some tuition because it's all remote and your costs are lower. Our costs are significantly higher to run this remote COVID context instructional environment. It will, in the end, cost millions of dollars to pay for all of the testing that we did this semester and next semester. But we feel that it's a responsibility that we have to our WSU and surrounding communities.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. That, as you mentioned, that buffer in January for really trying to get testing and everything through, I think it's going to be an important step for that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then the last question around the delayed start date, and this one came up, is graduate students really do rely on that assistantship funding. And so with the delayed start, should graduate students expect any lag in pay when we come back in the spring?
I'm just looking, because I asked Lisa that question, and she sent me something because she's offline right now. Let me just take a quick look. Let's see. Assistantships are defined by the term, not the week. And so students should be paid on the regular cycle. Assistantships will cover the period of January 1 to May 15th as per normal. There'll be no lag in pay due to the semester schedule.
Perfect. That's what we like to hear.
That's from Lisa Gloss.
Excellent. Dean of the grad school. I think it's safe to take her word.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I saw that question in advance. I'm like, I don't think so, but I don't like to give misinformation.
No, really appreciate it. And as I said, students will be glad to hear that, especially coming back from Christmas and winter break. Great. And then I think our last set of questions kind of builds on spring semester coming up and more the learning and teaching environment it's going to bring. And so you already kind of answered this first question. So maybe I'll rephrase just to, as you said, the majority of classes will be virtual still, with a 60 or so that are in person, so a hybrid format. Can you just give kind of the guidelines for what classes were chosen to be in person and what was chosen to stay virtual?
If his mic is able to come on, Craig, would you mind giving a little overview since you chaired the committee? Is that okay? Are we able to get him on?
He should be able to.
I see his connecting to audio.
Dots,
yeah. Craig Parks is vice provost in my office, and he chaired a small committee of faculty who reviewed each and every request. So I feel like it would be best if he spoke to that.
Perfect.
Sure. Yeah, happy to do that. Let me get my video on there too.
Great video.
Yeah. I wasn't expecting to be on camera, so
sorry.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. Gives a little levity on Friday afternoon. So you'll pardon me if I'm turning to the side. I've got my list open here so I can make sure that I accurately report. So I noted in the YouTube chat, we're going to have 63 courses in the spring, and that's undergrad, professional, and graduate, that have some type of in-person component. We have 38 this semester. So that's a considerable increase. And Provost Chilton has already talked about why that is, and just that things have gone very well on campus. With the bulk of the courses that have been approved are undergraduate courses, but there are some graduate and professional ones. So, and there aren't too many, but I think I can probably say all of them without it getting, just like I'm reading a list. So there are a couple of graduate courses in architecture that are going to have an in-person component. Both of these are studio courses where the students are in the very large architectural studio. By design, there's nobody within more than 6 feet of them. And they're not going to either, because they've of course got to be careful not to bump somebody while they're doing their work. There are a couple of graduate courses in athletic training for the Master of Athletic Training program. These are courses that require hands-on experience and hands-on practice. They're offering those this semester. So for example, the students need to be able to feel an injury and make a rapid diagnosis as to what might have happened so that they know how properly to treat it. And then they actually need to practice treating it so that they don't wrap an ace bandage too tight or misapply cast material, all of those kinds of things. And so they need that experience. Because they're in close physical contact, they are required to take additional PPE measures, and they're wearing medical grade PPE when they do this work, which is something they'll have to do as professionals anyway. And so it gets them going on that early. We are doing there's an electron microscopy course that's offered for doctoral students training on how to use an electron microscope. That will, the lab component of that will be offered in the spring. There is a methodology course in School of the Environment, analytical methods in earth sciences. There are some music classes, graduate music classes. These are for the most part, these are one-on-one tutorials. And we have a few of those going this semester. Primarily this semester, I think, we have piano going, and we have a couple of voice courses. We've greatly expanded those for the spring because some music professors are discovering that the Zoom format does not work well for one-on-one instruction. To give you an example, the cello. So the cello instructor has discovered that when he's teaching cello, or I'm sorry, not cello, upright bass, when he's teaching upright bass, he can see the plucking hand or he can see the fretting hand, but he can't see both, unless the camera is so far away that he can't tell what the student is doing. And so, so there are a number of situations like that if you think of larger instruments that have raised some issues. I think the only other one for me to mention is a graduate methodology course in soil science. It's environmental biophysics. And again, it's a lab course where the students are learning to use instruments. So and then the one exception I have to note is the DVM courses. So the first 3 years of the DVM curriculum are being offered face-to-face, and they're taking some, besides the fact that they also have to wear medical grade PPE at all times, just in the normal course of their work. They've really gone to some quite extraordinary lengths to make sure that that curriculum is not disrupted, because it is so hands-on and it is so experiential.
That is very helpful. And thank you for the list. I don't know, Craig, if you want to stay visual, just because this next one's kind of a follow-up. So your expertise might be desired. And you kind of already mentioned it. So maybe it's more just a confirmation that it seems like the classes that are staying in person or were selected to stay in person are those that really just cannot be taught effectively virtually, right? They require to be on campus. Because we did have a couple submissions from grad students saying our classes tend to be, 10 people or less. They're small in general. So is it, why aren't we allowed to be in person?
Yeah, and I can speak to that if I may. In general, we thought about this because there are some colleges that have graduate, seminars or courses that might have 10, 15, 20. But if you think about the pedagogical, how should I put it, impact of, let's say you had 15 in a class and you spread them out 6 to 10 feet apart in a lecture hall where you're all wearing masks and the professor is wearing a mask. And you're trying to have a discussion versus having a Zoom meeting like we're having right now. We really took into consideration both the pedagogical piece, like how would being in person versus remote, how would it either improve or detract from the pedagogy? That's the learning outcomes. That's what we're trying to get at. And then, what kind of classroom space would we have to space people out? Because we couldn't just put people in a regular old classroom, right? Craig worked really closely with facilities so that even for the classes we did approve to be in person, he would work with them on, well, where will they be? What will the schedule be? What's the egress? What's the exit, etc. So it was partly that. It was partly just taking into consideration what are the health risks and what is the potential benefit. My son is in college right now, and he's at a small liberal arts college where they literally moved all the students on campus. They locked the gates. They have not been able to leave campus since they came. They tested 100% of the students every other week. And if you're positive, they sequestered you. And so they have no cases now. They are able to have about 3 out of his 4 classes are in person. But when they're all wearing masks, and he's taking Italian. And he says he can't understand a word that the professor is saying. He said, it was better when it was Zoom, so you have to take those kinds of considerations into account as well.
One thing I'll note, just a point of congratulations for the professional and the graduate students. I've been staying in close contact with the programs that have been doing in-person experiences for professional and graduate students for this semester. And there's one program that has not had a single illness among their students. There's another one that had 1 illness the first week of the semester, and that student immediately did what needed to be done, and they have not had another one. And the faculty have been consistently applauding the graduate and professional students for not only being very careful, but actually taking of their own accord some additional steps to help make the in-person environment even safer and even better than the faculty imagined. And so I do want to share that. That's I think is something that is just very laudatory.
Thank you both. And yeah, grad students will take a little bit of praise whenever they can. So we do appreciate that. And we appreciate all the information about classes. And so I guess building off of that, this idea that the majority of classes are going to be virtual for safety reasons, but we do know that both teaching assistants as well as grad students who are taking classes are really struggling to accommodate to this long-term online virtual learning environment. And it might be easier in terms of like technical skills and how to actually go about it, but it's taking more of a toll on their learning if that's not the best way for them to learn is to be on screens. So are there plans for new resources to help students in this online teaching or learning environment, both as TAs or as students themselves?
Absolutely. So the Academic Outreach and Innovation Office has a robust series of toolkits, workshops, and resources, especially designed for instructional staff, including TAs. And they've recently added resources for engaging students and building community when teaching remotely, which could be used as a learner as well as an instructor. Craig, if you don't mind putting that link to the emergency toolkit in the chat for folks, that'll take you to a series of resources. But AOI, or Academic Outreach has been amazing, just helping us respond on offering 10 times the numbers of workshops, and they will work with people one-on-one as well, not just on the technological, as you say, but the pedagogical and the building of community. And it's something that we're all striving for.
That's great to hear. Yeah, I have also attended AOI workshops since this all started, and they are very helpful. So I'm glad they're continuing all their work and their efforts.
Mm-hmm.
And then almost out of questions, but one more is just continue with this virtual environment, virtual learning, being on computers all the time. We've already mentioned, Zoom fatigue is a real thing. And we're seeing more and more concerns from students around their mental health. And due to this prolonged virtual environment, they're afraid it's just going to get harder and harder to stay in this virtual world. So are there plans with WSU, with Cougar Health Services, to support or do more programs around mental health in the spring?
Yeah. So I know that we're working hard to shore up the Cougar Health Services and mental health services. But I also know that the graduate school provided an assistantship to health promotions for the fall. And this position will be renewed in the spring. And this is a grad assistant who has completed a survey of graduate students to analyze the use of health resources, particularly for mental health, to ask them about their awareness of the resources and then determine what the gaps are. And this short report should be available soon. I'm sure Lisa Goss will be able to share it with you. An immediate finding was that the students felt that they needed to be better informed of what resources were currently available and how to navigate the use of these, like Healthier You telecounseling, for example. So developing information resources is an ongoing project for this health promotions GA.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Because shameless plug for GPSA is we worked really hard to get that assistantship position.
Oh, all right. Well, congratulations and thank you for doing that. I didn't know that.
And she's amazing. And I took the survey myself. I know she got a lot of responses. And I think you're right. I think she is putting together just a quick, here's a report of all the big takeaways from it, which I think will help a lot. Mm-hmm. And Dean Gloss is, I know, working with her, and GPSA also. I feel like this is my job, shameless plugs for GPSA. We're also putting together a working group around health insurance and mental health, and they're working with that GA to, address any concerns and try to come up with new services. So that's really good to hear.
Yeah.
And then I think our last question around this is just about instruction. And this is kind of veering off, but it did come up a couple of times. Is we know that we are piloting the new platform Canvas this spring, which will replace Blackboard completely in the fall. And a couple of students just brought up that if they're part of a Canvas class or they're helping instruct with those who are piloting Canvas, are there going to be any trainings, tutorials, guides on how to switch over from Blackboard to Canvas? Mm-hmm. For students?
So yeah, AOI comes to the rescue yet again, and they will have a series of trainings on the Canvas platform, which will be open to all who will be using it. And I'm hoping Craig will also put in the chat the link to that. My husband is also a professor, and he's in the anthropology department, and he always curses and swears at Blackboard. So he was really happy to hear that we were shifting over to Canvas, which is something we used at one of our previous campuses. So I'm hoping that his perception will live out for everyone else too. It's always hard to switch platforms, even when you're not happy with it. It's hard to switch because it's like learning a language, right? But luckily AOI is on it, and I'm hoping that will be helpful to TAs and instructors, as well as to students as well.
That's great to hear. I know I've only used Blackboard. My undergrad, my master's, and my PhD now have used Blackboard.
Really?
So I'm a little biased. I like Blackboard, but I've heard very good things about Canvas. So hopefully the transition is smooth.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I think with that, we made it through all the questions that were submitted. Again, I want to thank you for answering all these. Graduate students, we're a small population and we have different problems, but this was really helpful and I think addressed a lot of the concerns we've been hearing.
Terrific.
And so I guess before we sign off, just any last words of wisdom, advice, information, anything you want to pass on to our students?
Oh gosh, it's, I guess what I would say is, because I am still advising one doctoral student, and he he's having a tough time, because when you're a graduate student, especially when you get to that thesis level, whether it's a master's thesis or doctoral thesis, um, motivation can be really tough, because you just feel like, it's a longer slog. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And so it's harder to see those landmarks, like to understand that you're getting there. And so I guess my only piece of advice would be to recognize that it's not you, and that's part of it. Particularly in my master's, I had that, just like staring at the blank screen and just like being so intimidated by it. And I can't imagine like trying to do that when I was also dealing with, everything that's going on in our world. And so, just recognizing that we're all in this together. We support you, that your faculty and your advisors are there to help you if you hit roadblocks, and to not be afraid to reach out.
I really appreciate that. And it's like you're reading my mind as I'm trying to finish up my own doctoral thesis. So thank you very much. We really do appreciate it. And I think just to all our students, if for some reason this sparked a new question, a new concern, anything, please feel free to send us an email, reach out to the Office of the Provost. They're also willing to answer or provide any resources. You saw, hopefully in the chat, Craig just has that go-to information for us. So that's really appreciated.
Yes. Thank you, Craig, for supporting.
Yeah, and for your guest appearance.
Yeah, that's right. And Mrs. Bill, Mr. and Mrs. Bill in the background.
Bill, yes.
Although I don't know, Jen, do you know Mr. Bill, Mrs. Bill?
I do not, but when we first started this and those popped on, they scared me a little bit.
Saturday Night Live, you have to YouTube it. The
Okay.
original Saturday Night Live, like we're talking the 70s.
Oh,
I wasn't born yet personally. No, I'm kidding. But if you haven't seen Saturday Night Live, Mr. Bill, you absolutely must. It's a perfect Halloween distraction.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And it will now be on my fun to-do list for Halloween tomorrow, as I'm saying inside. Yes. So thank you again.
Right.
I know so many town halls, but it's really, really appreciated.
Okay.
And I think for everyone, right, just have a fun, relaxing, and safe Halloween weekend.
Yes. Yes, you all too. Thanks for having us.
Of course. Thank you so much. And as we just kind of sign off, I will share some contact information for GPSA as our closing screen. So you can reach out to us with any questions, concerns you might have, or visit our website where you can find all our programs and services.
Sounds great. All right. Take care. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you. You too. Bye all.